We won't have a quorum unless we
Yeah.
fill in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
If you don't
out a
mind.
lot
Sure
today.
thing.
Oh, yeah, no, I
Happy to-
did somebody
Yeah.
about Dina Friday.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
we-
Either
What's it-
bring it- I shouldn't have back, but
You're
like
alive,
just
we're
in
alive.
case I'll print and bring.
Okay.
when we're out of town.
So, good evening. This is a regular scheduled meeting of the Business and Economic Development Committee for Thursday, October 17th. We have Councilor Schaefer, Councilor Leonard, myself, I believe Councilor David will be here shortly. Director of Development Ann Krieg is also here. We have a number of issues to go through tonight. I would start out by saying we have at our last meeting, we talked about a list of outstanding issues for BED. And Ann took a list that I had drafted and went through them and put staff comments with them. I think that was done not with the expectation that we would resolve all those issues in the remaining 2 weeks of this council year. But that we would have a guide or a tool to pass on to the next council chair, the next members of BED, to summarize what some of the issues were that needed further discussion, so that we didn't lose our place as we were making the transition. I think there were a number of items on the list that Ann provided some very good responses to. Several of them were to be deferred pending having a staff to address some of those. Others might warrant some additional discussion now, but certainly there are many items which warrant more discussion by the council at the next council year will begin, and it'll be up to that council and leadership of that at that time to address those issues. Neither Councilor Davenant or I will be part of BED, in the next council year. But I think it is important that we not lose things that we've been working on and that we keep them in front of us. We had a very similar discussion last night at Government Operations to have a working list of items that can provide guidance as we're going forward. And I would start out by just asking if any of you had an opportunity to review the material that Ann put together in response to the suggested list. If you had any questions of Ann on any of those responses, or if you saw any items that you felt we hadn't captured that should be on a carryover list as we're headed into the next year. Certainly one of those big issues, the first one on the list, was to adopt a 12 to 18 month plan that stated the city's intentions on what the city was going to do with respect to housing strategies. Now that hasn't had a complete discussion and provided that on an Excel spreadsheet with a status report on each one of those items for that draft housing plan. We haven't really adopted a housing plan. And I think that I believe it should be more formally adopted as a 12 to 18 month plan. But I think that that's going to have to be left for the next council to take a look at and make those decisions. And I hope it will happen. But I think much like we had talked about last night at Government Operations of formalizing a 12 to 18 month plan to deal with homelessness. We said last night that was a work plan. There were a number of items that were on it that did not yet have full council agreement or committee agreement. And just because it was written down didn't mean that it was what everybody accepted, but it should be discussed to get to the point where there is sufficient consensus to move that forward and to guide the city, the council, the staff, and to be transparent with the community on what our intentions are and what our action plan is, or what others' action plan will be in a couple of weeks. So we're walking that line between finishing up this year and wanting to perhaps leave a little bit of a legacy document while still recognizing that we're at the end of the year and we're trying to accomplish a lot of things, and everything will not get done quite as completely as we might. Any questions on what I said there, or any particular comments on the outstanding issues list, or the things that you think perhaps should be added to it, or questions you might have of Anne about any specific items?
My only comment is just for anyone who's watching along, that it wasn't, that these are all projects that take longer than a council year really to implement, like the commercial kitchen. So it's not that this is, it didn't get done in the time frame it was expected to get done, but more like almost like when an employee leaves their job and says, hey, here's the projects I've been working on, and here's where I'm at in those, and just to sort of have a summary. So I just don't want people watching or reading these documents to think that, wow, you were supposed to get all that done this year, because broadband is not, it's something we've been working on since I first came on council. The commercial kitchen is something that's been since I've been on council. And so these things take time, and just more of a, and here's where we're at in that process. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to anybody reading along or listening along.
Excellent point. Councilor Leonard.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to, be a repeating a record of the consistent things about trying to relay previous information from a committee chair to the incoming committee chair. That needs to be the new precedent of this council for committee chair roles in the future. For business economic development, as pertaining to the current ongoing housing crises in general, this packet of action plans and discussions, more than any of our other committees at this point, really needs to have a collaborative approach with our surrounding municipalities and county leadership as well. It's great for us to have a plan that works well for Bangor, but this is something that I hope council will take into our philosophy into next year, which is we have to be not as insular with our planning and our scope. What we develop here for a housing strategy also has to mirror what our municipal neighbors and county leadership has as well, because there is a need for 84,000 homes by 2035 that the state needs to fulfill, and Bangor cannot do that on its own. And so the more people that we can involve into this specific issue, housing, it's not only going to help shape for us what are the best strategies to succeed from an insular standpoint here in Bangor, but it also helps to bring other leaders to the table to collaborate on further items. So it's one simple thing that I know I've talked about in previous other committee positions regarding the subject matter, setting up our future committee chairs for success. But this one in particular is probably the most collaborative committee that that does exist in Bangor City Council. And I would even go as far to say that this is probably whoever is going to take up this position next year for a committee chair, this is going to be the most amount of work. And so we as a council need to be well aware of that, but also make sure that we are in support of what are the needs of Bangor and how we can help our neighbors as well. So thank you for the hard work you put in this.
Thanks for your comment. I just quickly reflect that one of the things on the government operations list from last night was the suggestion that there be regular meetings between the city council and the county commissioners to discuss not just budget issues, but issues in terms of what the county commissioners felt were high priorities for them, where they saw things going in the county as well as the city. And to do that on a somewhat regular basis. That's similar to the discussions we've had in the past about the desirability of the council talking with the school board on a regular basis, other than when we're just talking about money. But they'll talk about philosophy and vision and direction for the future. And I think to Councilor Leonard's point, there are ample opportunities to talk with the county about housing strategy. Any other comments or questions for Anne? I think she provided a a good indication of some dates and when she would be bringing some things forward. Some of that will be tonight. But I see this list as something that can be routinely updated, and the target dates for things changed. I think they agree with Councilor Schaefer that, some of these things take a while. But if we keep them in front of us, if the council keeps it in front of us, then continue to be nudging these forward and making sure they don't get lost. And I would only have one small comment here. I know we have a lot of upcoming discussions later this fall, and my only comment would be to, I think on the issue of the rental registry and licensure, we want to make sure that we're differentiating what we said in a recent meeting where we really said we wanted to emphasize moving ahead with at least the registry portion of that. And have perhaps a date for that. And while also recognizing that moving toward the code evaluation, not saying that quite right, but the inspection process and the licensure process, and to engage in a pilot program to do that. We had talked about that, but I think if that was reflected ultimately in this document, it clarifies the difference between those two things and allows for different dates to move that forward. A number of these things, also like the zoning issues on emergency overnight shelters, I think are still works in progress. And we're continuing some of the discussions of those things as well. But did you have any other questions for this group about any of these items or any other guidance which you need?
No, I don't. So, Councilor Leonard has a.
Sorry, I just had one more thing that I wanted to bring up under assessment of, I forgot about this note, assessment of childcare needs and strategies. I think this section in particular, it would be very helpful to, and I don't know if this is possible, try to have either a liaison from school board to be part of this discussion in particular, or something along the lines of having a relationship with someone associated with the school board, only because it's going to be very difficult for council to make some very nuanced decision making in regards to childcare, especially early childcare needs, without them having an understanding of what that process is once this child enters the school system, that they have a very good understanding of what those needs are. And so I know it's a small thing, but I think that would be very beneficial to us as a council to have their input on that particular part whenever it does come up.
Well, I think that's a significant thing. And because Bangor this year, I think just has gone the full day pre-K education. And that's significant in terms of its impact on working families and non-working families, but it's a very significant step. We have talked from an economic development standpoint about how essential adequate childcare is to a healthy workforce, an available workforce, and how important that is to our overall economic development, and the opportunity to have Bangor really recognized as an exceptional place for childcare. Here, locate your business here because these resources are available. So I think if we can get that discussion, advance that discussion, blend it with the school department's approaches, the after school approaches that are available through Parks and Rec as well as the schools, then we'll tie those pieces together. That's very helpful. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So downtown needs assessment. Continued discussion.
Yes, that's you want to come up and.
We're mentioning that.
Yeah, we can do an alley time. All right, so we have been meeting on a regular basis, I think monthly, right? We've been meeting, city manager, myself, Betsy and Eric from
Betsy Lundy. Executive Director of the Downtown Partnership.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hello.
welcome Council Trumbull to the table as well.
Yeah, so we've been meeting on a monthly basis just to go over, pending events, projects, and, things coming up that need attention from different departments. So I think it's been going really well, having that sort of set time that we always meet and to go over things. We had some items that we're sort of currently looking at, the issues with year-round sidewalk accessibility, safety and security measures, trying to do increased landscape and asset maintenance, and looking at the city for inactive, unusable buildings, making those investments.
How are we doing?
I think we've definitely moved a lot of issues forward. There's a lot more conversation, a lot more kind of ability to follow the trail through. So things, aren't sliding off the table. I think the city's done a great job of staffing up too, and being able to meet those needs. So that's been really great.
Okay, I know there've been times when city downtown partnership communication has not been optimal. And I think one of the things we've all tried to be working toward is having that communication be open and moving us all forward in a progressive way. So if we're getting the issues better identified through the needs assessment and ongoing conversations, then I think that's a positive sign.
We have a number of projects that we're kind of hanging out there for 3-4 years that the garage lighting project is like one example that kind of all come together all at the same time. So clearly, there's movement, there's direction, the communication is helping for sure.
I think that's very positive, and I know there is a let's call it a plan for what the city and the downtown partnership are going to be doing, and it's attached to tonight's agenda, an issues list, much like we're talking about for BED. What are the action steps that we're all holding in mind that we're going to be working on together? And I think to have that in place and then to have it periodically updated, and for you to come to BED, and I won't be making that decision, but hopefully for you to be coming to BED on a regular basis with Ann and saying, okay, here's the update. This is what's happening. This is what we've done. These are the new things that we ought to be considering. This is what's maybe not working. And to have that conversation, I think will be continuing to be increasingly helpful. And one of the things from the government operations standpoint that was on our list from last night is that we still have not fully clarified what the package of response strategies are to some of the homelessness issues. How we're tying together the work of the police department and BACS and the emergency trauma team and public works and HEAL and Parks and Rec. Those are a lot of individual component parts of an overall strategy. And I know that Debbie and Ann and others are working on how we package that together, but we really haven't clearly articulated the package yet of what it looks like as a program, an integrated program, and who's really in charge or running that program. And I think we've only identified that as one of the issues, but it certainly pertains to how we're responding to the needs downtown. And what that package of services is. And I think we articulated during our budgeting process last year that we would put that team together. And we still haven't quite got that defined. But I think that that's one of the things that's on the follow-up list that I think will get some more scrutiny. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. Sometimes what we do is we go through that table just to see, what projects are upcoming and Again, just to kind of keep tabs on what needs to happen, what departments need to be involved, and I think that's very helpful.
And it did make a summary from the joint needs
Oh, that's
assessment, that pulls out the things that are kind of still dangling out there that need more work, or more ongoing focus.
Mhm.
Do you want to pass that?
Yeah. Yeah,
All right,
no, if you wanna, yeah, go ahead. I can hand them out, yeah.
Is that different than what was in our packet?
No, this didn't make it into your packet,
Right.
so I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I remember when the initial one was presented, Counselor Spriggs was kind of like, this is a lot to take in, like, how do we know which ones are done, which ones are not done? So this is kind of a summary of the areas that still really need development and focus.
I'm just gonna, while you all are reading, I'm just gonna add that I think
Yeah.
the one thing that's probably highest on the list right now is the redistricting efforts. So Anne actually went and met with the DBP board
Mhm.
to talk to them about how we have the 3 different definitions of downtown and how we're gonna work to align those.
Only two?
There could be,
Yeah, there's a
could be
few.
more.
Yeah,
I was
that's
gonna
one.
say, it depends if you wanna talk about the downtown parking management and all of that stuff as well. So Ann did go and meet with the DBP board, and I think they were glad to hear sort of the work that was underway and the commitment that we have to sort of align all of that, all of those boundaries, if you will, especially ahead of a potential April 1 date, which would impact the assessment for the downtown. So that has financial implications as well as just operational.
We're putting together, at Ann's suggestion, a steering committee of people who would be in the potential added zones to talk about what that actually means in terms of what they're getting and what it will cost them.
Yeah, just having that stakeholder group is gonna be important for this project, because there's some areas where it's just, you might say, oh, it's just one lot. Well, that one lot, we need to meet with that property owner to go over that change, so. Yeah,
Would
there's
you
gonna
like-
be a lot of
Would
outreach.
you like to walk us through any of this? I mean, we're just getting it, but you.
Yeah, it's just, it really was just pulling out things from the table. Most of it is on the second page, the summary of, the cleanliness and safety issues in the downtown. Continuing to work with the BCAT team. Our park ranger program implementing this year is gonna provide additional presence, which is good. The recent award actually from the city council on ARPA funding to heal. To address some of those needs as well.
That's it. Any comments? That you'd add to Ann's?
No, I'm looking forward to continuing to work through some of these projects and
Okay.
get them cross finish line.
I think it's very helpful to have the documents that you gave us today from the needs assessment. Like the first time around, we got that on a Monday afternoon and it was too small for my eyes. It's so much better.
Yeah, they work to
But-
change that format.
But and then pulling it out here, I think just whatever we can do to kind of be clear on what the intentions are, what's happening and who's responsible. It will add to future discussions. And then we
Absolutely.
can just kind of keep it all in front of us and keep track. And then people can ask questions about where does this stand or that stand and maybe who's going to be responsible. So I think we've seen some improvement in the dialogue, which is very positive. We got some more work to do, but that will be an ongoing thing. But I think this is very positive. So thanks for your collaboration on that. Any other comments or questions?
Not this time. Just a quick one out of curiosity, when you were looking at one of the items about the umbrella, are the umbrellas down for the season now?
Yeah,
How many?
down for the season
how many
and then go
did you
back
lose?
up.
Couple dozen over the course of the season?
Well, no, because we had regular repairs. I mean, that's an
Right.
example of something that we'll come back and
Right.
talk about. So right now we're making the repairs, which means that it takes almost a week to get a permit to close the street. So every time
Yeah.
there's this like big lag. And then if it rains on that day, like then you're out another week, right?
Which is ironic for umbrellas.
Right. Meanwhile, Public Works can like roll up in a bucket truck anytime they want to, and because it only takes about 30 minutes once you're up there to like reset everything. So, we'll have more conversations about how we can like smooth out that process because they are slated to go back up in May along with the other amenities. We also had like the benches and the umbrella benches and planters that came via a ship and didn't arrive in early enough time that it made sense to put them out this season. So they're at Public Works and they'll go out next season. So that's. I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
I have just one, this is semi-related because it's at Public Works, but also at Public Works are the kinetic sculptures that used to be down at the waterfront. Is there any plan for those? And I don't know if waterfront is kind of out of your purview, right?
Well, funny enough, talking about redistricting, the actual waterfront part is in downtown Bangor. We don't have the other side of Main Street, but we do have the water side of Main Street. So we're like,
Well, they're out there by the,
yeah, we don't own those though. Those the city owns
Yeah.
those.
Half of them are out there, the other half
Yeah.
is still down.
yeah,
And then, if I recall correctly, they worked for about the first year and a half. And then for whatever reason, they stopped spinning.
well, every time
But I'm sure we have some folks who are very mechanically minded.
a
who would
family
love to try to
member
figure that out.
of mine that I am married to goes and drops off yard waste, he comes back and he says, when are they gonna put those up? Why are they just sitting there resting? So this was a good time to ask about.
Get it
those.
on the list.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'll find
yeah,
out.
those are really cool. Those would be good to have
Yeah.
back.
Okay,
Right, and while Betsy's here, we do have another request that's next on the agenda, the approval of the banners for Hamlin Park.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
okay. So any discussion, comments, observations?
I would thank Orno Brewing Company for sponsoring the lights in the park. It makes it just makes a huge difference and it's one of the cool things about our downtown.
Yeah.
My daughter said somewhere we were listed as like one of the coziest. Have you seen this? I'm looking at you, Betsy, like,
I haven't seen cozy.
like some, like some, one of the coziest winter towns or something like that.
Oh,
It was
okay.
pictures of like the lights and stuff. So she thought that was like,
Yeah.
I
And we
don't
did-
exactly know.
If anyone hasn't noticed, we did put up bistro lights on the street because we have now that suspension structure
Yeah, that looks
stays up even when the umbrellas come down. So we put bistro lights up there too. It's amazing what those things do to
Dinners,
cozy up the downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
Councilor Trevor?
And they're not specific to the banners, but just in the park, and I think this came up in your report about some of the sidewalks downtown. And it's not your issue, but both Norbega Park and Hamlin Park are really in need of some new brickwork in there, so.
In Central Street. I was actually walking on Central Street the other day and was like, this feels like you're in a fun house.
Yeah.
Not very accessible.
Yeah.
All right.
So where does that issue go? I mean, and you're writing it down, but where does that sit?
So. So. One of those parkways is likely going to get dug up next year to deal with the retaining walls along Kenduskeag. So we have not put a whole bunch of resources into fixing those sidewalks, because when that work is done,
Mhm.
basically everything from the retaining wall
Mhm.
in beyond that walkway is going to be removed. And we've been working with Betsy and obviously those in the downtown beautification, because we have a number of individuals, for example, who have bulb plantings down there
Yeah.
and shrubberies and want to make sure, so we make sure to align ourselves.
Jefferson said that it's not, because we have this whole like plan that we were gonna deploy to rescue the plants
Right.
this fall as part of our fall cleanup, but he said that next year it's not being dug up, that they're just doing the study, and then the year after it will get dug up,
Okay,
from what I understand. So there will be a.
so
massive plant
you've had a
sale.
conversation since I did.
Yeah, because I was
Okay.
just kind of like, do you have
Good.
a date? Do you have a timeline? Like, we want to make sure that
Yeah.
some people have very special plants in there, so we wanted to.
That's not to say that we shouldn't, we'll talk to Public Works and about doing what we can for an infill perspective. It may not be the most attractive, but perhaps somebody won't twist an ankle.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
this issue over
Yeah.
to you, Public Works. Just to track it. Okay,
Thank you.
okay,
Thank you, that's it.
thank you.
Oh, we're done with animal
I
banners?
think we are.
Yeah.
Oh,
gonna say that was an
okay. Yeah, there you go. Hearing no opposition to that, that will have passage.
All right, next on the agenda is just a sort of a check-in on the housing FAQ. Anya had done, want to come up for a sec? Anya had has been working with Cody in the manager's office to come up with some pretty nice things on the website, just to, so people can, oh, and here it comes. Just so that we can track where we are with our dwelling units. I know I had to speak yesterday on housing at University of Maine, and I had that up on my screen, so I could just quickly be able to tell people what's going on, and I mean, it's really helpful. And so if you, as he scrolls down, you can see the permitting aspect, and then there's the financial support that's given through ARPA and the block grant program.
And
That's great.
Yeah, we have all the regulations done over the last few years too.
Oh, yeah.
Links to the council orders, so.
That's awesome. It's nice to, I'm sorry. Well, I'm just thinking it's one of those things that, so like these years, I've been on council since 2018, and I feel like I know we've done these things, but to actually see it all in one place, when sometimes it can feel like you're just
Yeah.
trying to drain the ocean with a spoon. It's nice to have a list of things that the council has actually moved forward and moved us to, we'll never be perfect, I don't think, but we can see where we've been. So it's nice to see it all on one page. That was great.
And we're
Yeah.
planning to update it as new things come up and as we get new units, we'll keep the numbers updated as well.
That's great.
So.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate this. I've actually already shared it with a few people, including city council candidates who asked housing questions. I'm like, here you go.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, as this goes forward, ways that we can, like the different barriers and all that stuff, it links to things, but sort of how you can take advantage if you're a landlord, like how you could work with the city and sort of link to like CBDG funding. So we can start to tie like, ways that people can get involved to assist. But I think this is a really helpful data.
Yeah, and there are some of those links
Yeah. Yes. I did
related
see
to the
that.
rehab.
Yep, and like the what's
Yep.
next and additional resources. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's great. But yes, as we can like tie stuff together in terms of like collaboration, but this is awesome to see. Thank you.
Part of what we've discussed in a number of meetings is that it's very important to put out, when we can, a very positive narrative. Because it is so easy to just get caught up in the negative things about housing. We know it's a huge critical issue. But it's important to be able to point to something like this, and I think this is good work, so thank you very much. To be able to say, okay, there are 383 units in development. That's not a small number of units. I mean, it's not as many as we need. But when we do the housing
Corrections.
production study, then we're gonna have a better fix on how many we do need and
Right.
what the forecast should be and what the trend should be. But having this up and being able to keep it updated so that any counselor can say to constituents, yes, we have done many things related to housing, positive things, and here's the website, and get people to it. I think will be very helpful. Because oftentimes, I know I get questions and a lot of concern about housing. And we have now suggested that we have a 12 to 18 month plan for how to deal with some of those things. And part of the plan is to convey the data. So I think this all fits nicely. So thanks.
Yeah, I can't take credit for the website. Cody designed everything and everybody worked together on it, so.
Well, thanks, Cody.
Yeah.
Great.
We should bring him out. For a bit.
All right, next on your agenda is 2 Hammond Street, recommendations from the Downtown Parking Advisory Committee.
I have to, before we go further on this, I have to ask whether you all feel that I have a conflict. Because one of the letters of support for the action of the applicant here was from my son. So if you feel like I have one, let me know. Council Leonard?
The way I viewed this, because I was thinking the same thing coming in, and please let me know if you disagree with me. I see this as a letter of support from someone that, correct me if I'm wrong, does not actually have ties to the business associated here. If I'm wrong on that, please let me know, but I don't really see a conflict for this letter of support, but please confirm me if that's not accurate.
I don't think there's a conflict. I think if you had written a letter of support, that would be a conflict. I trust that you are professional enough to handle this, and I just don't see a conflict in that. Thank you for asking though.
Go ahead, Ann, please.
Yeah. So at the September 28th meeting of the Downtown Parking Advisory Committee, the committee had reviewed the request to convert parking spaces at the next to the property at 2 Hammond Street to be used for outdoor seating for the tenants in 2 Hammond Street Bar Restaurant. The committee talked about it for a while, and they unanimously voted not to recommend the proposed change at this time. For a couple reasons. The first is they want to do a comprehensive parking plan of the downtown before they recommend any changes. And they also had significant concerns about the negative impact on the community of the proposed use rate next to the Charlie Howard Memorial. The applicant is Dash Davidson, and he is here this evening on Zoom, and he also wrote a response to the proposal.
Councilor Trumbull?
I had to leave that meeting before we got to this item last time. Is this is it year-round use of those spots or just seasonal use?
I'm assuming seasonal if it's outdoor seating.
So they would become available for parking in the. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to this. I mean, I'm not gonna be biased just because Stanford beat Colorado over the weekend.
That was not Stanford's doing by itself.
But I think I'm open to it. I still would like to go through the process. I think we're gonna change parking. I think it should go to the park committee. I mean, we've got a process in place. I think this is a good use. I think they'd be a good steward of the park. I think it would help the park, keep the park area clean and presentable. I think it would be nice. I think those are key spots. You don't want to lose them, but you know, they've done a great job with the buildings they've done downtown. And I think if we can send this to the park committee to come back with it.
They did, and they said no.
No, they said no. The park committee said no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and on that point, it's partially my mistake. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, so I fear the parking committee just got this plan kind of in a bit of a void. I hadn't been able to put together the letter or really, communicate what our vision for the space would be and for the indoor space as well as the outdoor space as well as the park. So that's what I tried to communicate to you all with the letter that you've seen, as well as the recommendation and letters of support from the various community leaders, Deb Newman, Ben Sprague, and Preservation Commission about this project. So, I'd be happy to talk through the plan and the vision. My business partner is actually going to be handling the build out of the space. Zach Pike is in the room tonight with you, so he can help as well, on the ground if there are any questions. And, I think at a high level, we're very excited about really completing this third phase of the 2 Hammond project. We have, as I'm sure most of you know, the Chamber of Commerce on the ground floor, a real pillar of the community in Bangor, and we're very proud to call them our tenants. And then on the upper floors, over the past 3 years, we've renovated this historic building. We've won a preservation award, and we've added 8 critically needed apartments to the building, which have been completely full and occupied since we opened in 2021. And the third phase is to try to make more of a mixed use use for the building so that the public can actually come enjoy the space, the building, its history and its location, whenever they want. Not obviously the residential is only for the tenants, the chamber is for the chamber use. So it's been our goal all along to create a true public space in the building, and that will be what we're calling our speakeasy, and it'll be in the old drive-through teller area of the bank, kind of on the kind of back corner. So a space that used to be used where people, just going to take money out of the bank, and now it'll be used for a different use, and it will really celebrate kind of that part of the building and its history. And we hope to have the use indoor as well as outdoors so that people can enjoy the banks of the Kenduskeag, which is a really beautiful part of the city, and the Riverwalk, which has been improved, by great investments through the city, and frankly, in my opinion, is underutilized right now. And we have security cameras around our building, and we see some terrible things really going on at all hours of the day and night, just directly outside the building, directly in the middle of downtown. And it's my belief that those things happen and people fill the void when there's not a lot of people and activity around. And I think that's been a problem in downtown, which you all, as well as Betsy, are working to address. So it's our goal that we can bring more business, more activity, more people, more commerce, more bodies to the downtown area, to our building, to the areas outside our building, to help, add to economic development, but also to dissuade nefarious activity. So with all that being said, happy to answer any questions you have. And of course, as part of this project, we've already spent time and resources and money on improving and weeding and taking care of the Charlie Howard Memorial. And that will only continue with this aspect of the project, which will hopefully bring more people to experience the memorial, get to experience its beautiful location in the city, and just make it, frankly, a more active space.
Councilor Schaefer.
I'm not in support of it at this time. After the parking committee goes through and does their thing, and it goes back to the parking committee, and there's a more solid plan. Building was purchased knowing that there's a memorial right next to it. To me, it's a place that we want to make sure that we honor that really well. And if they were looking to put outside tables on the parking lots on the other side of the building, and that, like, the parking lots are owned by the developer on the other sides, that would be different. But that piece, that with its such close proximity to the memorial, I am not in support of that. If the parking committee, if a detailed plan shows that it's not going to be people traipsing through the memorial and stepping on a grave, to me, it's a grave, and that's how it feels. And that's why I would feel the same if it were a war memorial. If it were, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier or something, it's up there for me. So I am not in support of it. Once the parking committee does their comprehensive thing, as the business gets going, if there were seats put out on I call it the interior parking spaces, but the space between like Mexicali Blues and 2 Hammond Street, I would have no issues with that. But this particular location, I can't support it this time.
Councilor Leonard.
I have to completely agree with Councilor Schaefer on this point. This was the Charlie Howard Memorial. That was a national tragedy. The entire nation was encapsulated when that murder occurred, and it shocked our small town. It shocked our community, and I'll put it this way. If this were to be presented to the Racial Equity Committee and they were to come forward and say, okay, we don't have an issue with this, that would open me up to the conversation. But if this wants to be continued further, this discussion, this needs to go forward to the Racial Equity Committee. I will not, if this were to come forward to council, I would right now support no on this. So that's my stance at this current time.
Councilor Dava.
Thank you. And I don't know if Councilor Leonard is actually on the committee, so if we need a motion
From.
I'm not.
Okay, because I would agree with both Counselor Leonard and Counselor Schaefer, and sending it and putting our equity human rights group to use on this makes a lot of sense to me. I don't think or at least a couple of us are going to be here to vote on this in the future, but I would uphold the parking committee's vote at this time. Would want to see their comprehensive plan before we move forward, and just a lot more detail proposed. I think what Dash and they've done amazing things for our downtown, and this is not to go against that, but I do think this space needs a lot of serious consideration in the way it is right now. I wouldn't support it. So if we can send it just for an overview with the equity committee, as well as tabling it until there's a comprehensive plan, would be my suggestion.
So you're suggesting not an outright denial, but a pause,
While we hear back from others.
pending further information from the parking advisory committee and perhaps input from the Committee on Racial and Social
It's
Justice.
100% guaranteed input from them.
My recommendation would be that if there were firm plans coming from the developer that actually showed renderings of what it looks like, because all I can picture is people just traipsing through there with trays of drinks, and maybe that's not it, but I don't have a picture of what it is. So I would say that I think the process would be, let the parking committee figure out their comprehensive plan, have you guys do up drawings, like, here's what we're gonna do to make sure that this is not desecrated in some way, and then send your actual drawn plans along with whatever the parking committee recommendations are, then send that to racial equity. I wouldn't send it at this point because we really don't know what it looks like or what the plans are at this point. So I wouldn't want to send it to that committee and then find out that the parking committee says, no, we don't want any parklets ever again. Like, I just feel like the order of operations should be parking committee or detailed plans, parking committee, racial equity, back to BED and us.
Could I ask a question to the counselors?
Yeah, look, I just have a couple of comments and then Dash, you can ask whatever questions you have. I think this all makes sense. We just add a couple of nuances to it. I think when the developers proposed what they were going to do in the building and it was permitted, they proposed that they were going to put a speakeasy in as part of this development. So this, I don't think this is a new thing. The outdoor seating may be clearer, but the desirability of having something in multi-use in that space, I don't think is a new concept. So we've essentially given them approval for part of this, but I think this is the outside piece that was not clear.
I mean, we're not talking about the speakeasy part at all.
Right. And I think what Mr. Davison has said, and it may be that had he done a fuller presentation to the parking committee, they might have better understood what this was, and having some drawings to see what it looked like might help. So it might be worthy to take back at some point when there are some drawings. It could take, I don't know, when's the parking study likely to be done?
Yeah, I mean, the RFP probably won't go up for another month,
Yeah, so
so
it's
it's gonna be a while.
Not
A year.
imminent, you know, and to delay development until the end of the parking study, if it takes a full year to get it done, seems to be perhaps not totally necessary.
Can I ask a clarify, but this isn't, are these 3 parking spaces essential to developing the speakeasy part? Is it only outdoor seating?
It's not, yeah, it's not an essential.
Could you-
I'm interpreting this as outdoor seating would be a benefit, just like it was for Black Bear, just like it has been for
Please introduce yourself.
happy endings or whatever. Not that and I have no problems with the speakeasy and that, like, I don't feel like we're slowing down development on that. It's literally every parcel that comes through to us really has to be approved, and this one is in a really unique space. Also parklet season, what's, is it April or May? What is it? May. So we have 9 months anyway until parklet season is even here. So I don't want to conflate what they're doing with the speakeasy. That's fine. That's not on the table at all. It's literally these parking spaces and how their proximity to a memorial in our city. Like that, those are the only 2 things. I don't care what happens inside the building.
You
Apologize.
introduce yourself,
Hi,
please.
my name is Zach Pike. I'm a project manager here in downtown Bangor. I'm partners with Dash and his group of people. We do lots of different projects throughout downtown. We were the ones who did the renovation for High Tide Capital in down at 2 Hammond Street.
Mhm.
And now we're the ones who are taking on the opening of the Speakeasy, which I don't have a name for yet, so I would call it something, but I don't have a name necessarily for it. And the outdoor seating does on some level go hand in hand with the interior space because it's a very small, limited area. Obviously, it's still a lot of resources to develop the inside space. So having those extra seats on the outdoor area are fairly important to just a cash flow process for the area. As you can see with lots of other outdoor places in downtown, like the Blaze and the different coffee shops and all the other areas that have outdoor seating in their spaces as well, in parking spaces in front of their buildings. So it's still an important aspect of it. And in no way is this at all supposed to be a negative impact on the Charlie Howard Memorial at all, nor is it people trancing through with drinks or glasses or things like that. I mean, it's a very respectful aspect of what that is. We were very respectful when we did the renovation of the whole entire building, and there's no way we want to we only want to like highlight how wonderful it is, how important it is as being local community members ourselves, not try to diminish how important it is and the reason behind it. So I think with a more fulsome plan, like we were discussing, those are good ideas to make sure we get these other groups involved to understand what we're trying to do. And I understand that right now you guys might not have the fuller scope of our intent. So I think that kind of makes it a little bit more complicated to talk about, but that's not obviously our intent at all. And it's such a beautiful part. I mean, I don't know, up until when we renovated the building, the staircase was dilapidated and horrible through that whole area. Nobody could even walk down that staircase. And Dash did a fantastic job trying to get the city to help repair those areas of town so that people could actually walk down and enjoy the Charlie Howard Memorial, area. And right now it's fairly underutilized and sort of like almost two big sidewalks that are tragically probably not as accessible as they could be for handicapped individuals. That would be a big part of trying to like fix those areas as well for accessibility to that walk path along the river. So I mean, I feel like this could be some great synergies to extend the parks all the way from Franklin Street all the way through to the parking garage, which people already have hard time accessing on that area. So I feel like this would be one more spot to help get that, traverse the downtown Bangor area.
I think we're getting a little ahead of the skis though, because really what the issue is that parklet, we don't have it, I would, if we had a clear vision and explanation, we might be thinking differently, but we really don't at this time. And so I think that having the park study, even if the parking study is going on concurrently as you draw out and say, hey, this is what we want, it might even be helpful to the parking committee as they're doing the study to be like, this is our intent for this space, and be extremely helpful to BED and council to be able to look at it and say, oh, this is the vision right now. And it's, I don't know if the Charlie Howard Memorial is something you enjoy. I think it's a little bit more reverent, and I take a little pause and like, oh, we can all enjoy this memorial, because that's not the point of the memorial. And so having clear plans and taking that back to the parking committee, having the parking committee make sure it goes through the racial equity committee, and then having it come back to us would certainly help the council make a more informed decision. Right now, it feels like a very uninformed decision. What we know is that we have a monument that's really important right next to a building that's been redeveloped, which is great, and we want to make sure that both things are considered.
Okay. I want to go to Mr. Davidson, who we said had a question, and then come back to council.
Yeah, and thank you, Zach, for chiming in, and thank you to the counselors for the guidance here. And I hear what you're saying, and we're not trying to expedite any process, or we want to make sure this is done correctly. And I appreciate the council, and we'll definitely take whatever guidance you recommend. I think from my perspective, at a high level, I'm concerned about some of the activity that happens around my buildings in Bangor, specifically here at 2 Hammond, which is kind of our first and frankly the nearest and dearest to my heart. So if I may, I can show a video that was captured 2 weeks ago directly outside the Speakeasy. And I don't. Okay, we don't have to show that, but you can imagine what happens in the middle of the day. So part of our goal is to actually activate the building. And so that should be happening all around the building and all of our buildings. So that's just one of the goals of when we come to a downtown. We're trying to do the exact same thing at 27 State. We're trying to do the same thing at 33 State. So I just want council to know that it is we're really working hard to try to bring more people and businesses downtown. So that was the last thing I kind of wanted to leave you with as far as we talk about this specific item, but also more broadly in our efforts downtown to work with Betsy and Ann and the rest of the team in all our projects downtown.
I would just comment and encourage that last part of working with Betsy and Ann. And we're really moving to deal with some of those issues downtown in terms of negative things that are happening around some of your buildings to prevent that and to mitigate that in a number of different ways. That's part of an overall strategy, and I think downtown property owners like yourself and like really makes that that collaboration will improve the quality of those areas as well. But I think you can see that there's clearly a sentiment that this committee and the council needs additional information and further discussion and a bit more developed approach, reviewed again by parking and by racial justice committee in order to be able to fully process this proposal. Council Davitt.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And particularly like to try and, divorce the idea of everything with Charlie Howard Memorial, which I think Councilor Schaefer has spoken really well to just that, thinking in this parklets, regardless of what was there. I mean, I would still, and I imagine the parking committee, I think having Dasher or Uzak, present to them would be great. But even now, like if you took that part away, it's still parklets that we really trying to be thoughtful about and what we're adding and things. So I would need to see more plans and how that would be utilized, even if it wasn't this piece. And then you add that in and it just makes it that much more important. But no, I would not be saying just flat out no this evening. I think that there's just more steps that we can look at.
Councilor Turnbull.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the fact that we're gonna try to get more input into this process, but I mean, personally, I think it would be helpful to have more activity in that area, and I think it's gonna enhance the memorial. But my question is really about the parklet process here. Now, I was confused by something Councilor Schaefer said, but we have to approve all the parklets. I thought we put a process in place, so what's the process if somebody wants to have a parklet? I thought they could get 2 spots and adjacent.
Right, I don't think parklets go to.
They don't. We have it in a document.
Right, so
Right.
why is this not available? This abuts their property, right? So why aren't these available as a parklet, as part of our parklet policy?
We didn't see it as part of the parklet, that's why we sent it to.
No, I know, wow,
Right. But I'm not sure it is because it's part of the municipal parking lot. It's not, on street spaces.
well, the
So-
time space, it's not a permanent space, right? They just.
No, they're
that's
not
just-
permanent.
is that,
They're just
that's not
open.
on street, but that was, there's 3 spots there as you go around the.
Right,
Or-
but that's part of all of that public parking lot that's back there, all those spaces that are along the river, those are public spaces.
Oh, you're talking about the ones further down.
Yeah.
okay.
So I saw that as a parking lot area.
Is
as
that how's
opposed
it
to-
designated on the parking map? I mean, it looks to me, they abut their property. I don't, it's just on the backside rather than the front side of the property, so.
Right,
How many spots can you get? You can get 2 spots or 3, how many spots can you get as a parklet?
3, well, for parklets, you can only use.
Right, 2, so it would seem like to me, under the policy, that they would be able to get 2 if they wanted them, I don't know. How you would.
But there's, and to clarify, I didn't mean that we approved it. I meant that there was, like, you can't just go put up a fence and some chairs and say, I
Right, after the.
plate your flag
process,
and say, I
right,
own
right.
this now. But
Right.
it's what I mean, council approved it, but then it was a
Right.
permit through the city or whatever. But there's also, it's 3 spaces and a crosshatched area for pedestrian access there too. So it's not like 2 parallel parking spaces on the street. It's a unique
It's
spot.
like State Street, you've got the straight, the ones that are angled, and it's not that, I don't know, I don't see it that much difference. It abuts their property.
But I think there's room for some additional discussion
Right.
about that
Yeah.
point. Because it depends on whether you interpret it that there's a street going through there and these are parking spaces that are adjacent to the street. or whether they're just parking spaces that are part of a bigger parking lot
Right.
that's down there. So that probably ought to be added to the consideration of the options.
Mhm.
I think it also helps to add that it's a very unique space. It's not like just a regular on-street space. There's a memorial nearby. There's the river. There's a couple different walking paths. There's some challenges with access on those walking paths. Some are on our property, some are not on our property. It's interesting, all the differences that kind of revolve around the area. So I think some of those things would be much better explained with a better plan to point out what that is, so it's not as ambiguous as it is. And then it's like, if it was a parklet and we could have two spots, then there's this one really weird spot. Maybe it's better to have the three spots, you know, it's just, it's an odd one. So I feel like it's been really helpful having to talk with everybody, so we get a better, clear path forward, so we can do a better job with our plan and put it in front of some other people to get some better advice from a collaborative advice from everybody. So that makes it a little bit, I think, easier and straightforward, at least more understandable, whether it's still what it is, but
Yeah.
at least more laid out.
And pictures speak 1,000 words.
Absolutely.
And so I think if you come back with really clear pictures and not just a circle, it's gonna make a lot more sense to anyone who looks at it, whether it's parking committee, whether it's BED, whether it's full council.
Do you feel that you have adequate guidance from us at this point?
Dash, I think we have a pretty good, I have some notes here. I'm sure you have some notes too, as far as,
And I know you can continue conversations with
We
Ann
can set up a
Mhm.
time to meet.
and work that through.
Yep.
And then Ann can work on how that is best brought back to parking committee and to the racial justice.
And one of my questions was, it sounds good that the comprehensive parking plan seems like it's about to happen, maybe a month or so, I think is what I heard. And is there a set guideline of how long that process takes? I mean, is it a bid process from different people that do the plan? I mean, what does that process look like?
You know, it's gonna be a sort of a parking review plan where we'll have some consultants working with the parking committee to sort of look at comprehensively at the whole parking area for downtown and how it's managed, how it's used, you know, that type of thing. So, I mean, in terms of meeting with stakeholders and things like that, it could take a year.
Yeah.
Just realistically,
Or maybe less,
or maybe less.
maybe more.
We
And
always
I would add that, like, I think that's good to have the parking study too, but also if we had, I say these things could happen concurrently. If you came back with other plans and went to the parking committee, even if they were in the study, you know, and went to racial equity and all those bases were covered. If the comprehensive plan says that these are 3 key spaces, then that's one thing, but, you know, I feel like just even a simple rendering would be super helpful to understand the scope and to help explain it to other committees.
And I think what we're saying there is even though the parking study may be underway, it may be possible to expedite a decision based on the material that's
Right.
presented and discussion by the various committees. So that could be occurring at the same time the study was being done.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Davidson, do you have any other comments or questions?
No, I think this has been instructive and helpful, and, you know, we'll work with Ann moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor
Just
Turnbull.
throw something else out, and in my mind, I can't picture where it would be. But if there's some other public area that's not adjacent to you, there was a new state law that went into effect a couple of years ago where you can actually have liquor. And it doesn't have to be adjacent to your property. You can use public property, outside public property. It doesn't have to be adjacent. It might be more cumbersome because of you want servers and stuff, and you have to go further, but I don't know if there's another public area close by that would work out, but there's a new law that went in effect, but it doesn't have to be adjacent to your.
Let's just shut down the bridge.
Yeah, there you
We'll have
go.
dining and
Yeah.
eating in the bridge.
No,
Nobody needs to drive there.
Yes,
We'll be
yeah.
further away. It'll
Well,
be
you
like.
got the walkway, you got a couple footbridges there.
Okay, thank you.
No need
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah,
Don't-
yeah, don't even do that, you know?
Thank you very much. We got Council Yakubauer on,
Yep.
but without a microphone or video, right?
She's
Yeah,
Calling
en
you.
route, so she has the ability.
Aha. Okay,
I'm
Just wanna-
listening.
Just want to know that you're there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Ann, check in from staff.
Yeah, first is the block grant. Yeah, I think you're first on. Let me double check my agenda. Yes, lots of staff updates.
Yes, so for CDBG and homeownership, I know you can pretty much tell, like, there's a lot to unpack here. You can rely on me to give you great big bites of things. But just to try to distill this a little bit, we are trying to work on housing from many different angles. And so I can just kind of fill 3 buckets with the memo to you all, and that is that we're trying to improve our materials that are located on our website, make the descriptions easier to understand, group different types of owner occupied and homeownership activities in the same place so that they're easier to kind of distill to a home buyer or anyone with residential property of the options that are available to you. And really, some of the changes that we're trying to make are in the specific buckets for the eligible properties and the types of assistance that we can use. And so in conversations with other stakeholders around the state, with HUD, with Maine Housing, we're really looking at what are the trends coming out of the pandemic and what actually are the real and known factors that have contributed to the housing crisis. And I think homeownership is also one of those things that, we really can look at in terms of how we're really looking at housing units within the city. And so, just as we saw, stagnating growth with the creation of new housing units overall, we also have seen a really reduced number of people buying new homes. So the pipeline of folks that are renting are not also then moving into home ownership the way that they might have once done when houses were not so unaffordable in many different respects. And so our goals in CDBG over the last 6 years, I've noticed the trend that we're not really meeting the homeownership goals throughout. And then, of course, the pandemic really threw a monkey wrench into things. And so in order to try to recover this, I'm trying to make some of these programmatic changes. And so to some of the points that Councilor Sprague had said, every time we move an eligible home buyer into a home, we're also actually emptying and vacating a rental unit. So we're kind of getting a double bang for your buck. So you could think about it in terms of housing production, just in the availability. So we talked about the expansion of our allowable units. So HUD does allow us to make assistance grants to people that want to purchase mobile homes. They specifically do not put a lot of property standards on that specific mobile home. In my memo, I discussed some restrictions that could be considered by this council that mirror other regulations for comparable HUD-funded programs, like the home program, and then also Maine Housing with their mobile home mortgages. They have specific types of restrictions to those. And this is really just out of our understanding that there's a lot of our median home price here in Bangor is $290,000. So you're really looking at, well, what can we really afford? And oftentimes, folks are saying, well, maybe I really can just afford a mobile home. So what we're trying to do is try to see what we can do to remove some barriers to the types of houses that people can consider. So I'm asking this council to provide direction on the expansion of our eligible units to include manufactured housing, but what we're really talking about is the mobile homes. And the memo also says that I would really like us to consider conforming the property types to also include main housings, multifamily unit financing. Currently, we allow 1 and 2 units. They have expanded theirs to include 1 to 4 units. So I feel like that would be a good move as well, because they are also imposing very, very strict standards for their buyers and for, you know, all of the different things that they consider when approving those mortgages. So for us to be able to consider what those qualifications are and to not create an additional barrier in being able to allow a buyer to choose that type of assistance. So just to kind of put that in one bucket and hear your feedback on the addition of unit types.
Council Down.
Thank you. I think this is wonderful. The more we can do to expand it, and you've done it in such a thoughtful way. So I would move staff recommendation.
I would second, but I do have a question. What is the 1970s? Is there a reason why it's 1976?
Yes, prior to 1976, there were different building codes in place. And so prior to 1976, there were higher incidents of using flammable materials, for example. And so HUD moves that they hope to, and they actually will replace, main housing will replace every pre-1976 mobile home with a brand new mobile home. Of course, that's a main housing program, and we're not doing that here. We could, but we, you know, if there's money available other places, definitely use that. But pre-1976 had a lot to do with the mobile home materials. And interestingly enough, at one of our many housing conferences that we've been to, we learned that actually mobile homes and their specific codes are actually even more stringent than for stick-built homes. So the materials and all of the specifications that go into the newer models.
And that was sort of be my next question.
Yeah.
I've always like these tiny home shows. I'm like, you clearly haven't driven through rural Maine, because the original tiny home is the trailer. Like, you know, they're like, oh, we're gonna build this. I'm like, yeah,
Right,
they've been around forever. But I also didn't know if there was any other benchmark of safety improvements or that past 1976 that, because it's like you could set your own year, just if that should be considered. Otherwise, I'm very supportive of this. And then do we have the same, maybe it doesn't matter, but for tiny homes, are tiny homes also supposed to be on a foundation on owned land?
So I did not address tiny homes because tiny homes and manufactured housing for the purposes of this are
The same.
specifically different. So a tiny home is not also considered a manufactured home. And, you know, for many different programs, they'll have like minimum sizes.
Okay.
For CDBG, I was not addressing tiny homes specifically.
Great.
So this was just removed from that. We didn't really examine, you know, how that would play into some of our other programs and ordinances and things like that.
So it sounds like this will align with what other standards are and just bring us into alignment.
Right, it really is just designed to make sure that we can work well with other HUD programs.
Right.
Couple of questions. How does this fit with the plan we put forward every spring to HUD for our CBDG plan for the year? Do we have to go in and modify that plan, or do we just do what we want to do and tell them about it later?
No, it doesn't actually do that. We don't have to modify it because we're staying within their guidelines.
Okay.
And we're not asking to substantially reprogram funding. So really, when we submit the action plan, we're submitting the activity of homeownership assistance writ large. And then we're also, you know, designating what our budget will be in those specific categories without addressing, you know, the, you know, semantics of our, you know, different policies and procedures. So
Okay.
we design, you know, that we're going to have a homeownership program, as an activity and that we will, put forward in our budget.
And have you estimated at all the financial impact on our available funding by making this change? I mean, or how much you think might flow out for these types of activities out of the pool that we have available?
Right, so far, we've actually fallen short about 50% for the goals that we've stated in our yearly plans. So we actually budget for twice as many home buyers assisted than we actually do. And I went and I brought that back to 2018 to see if I could find some pre-pandemic numbers to see what we might be able to, look at in terms of trend line. Of course, we're still, trying to untangle what the pandemic has really done, but there's a lot of room to grow. We make about 8 or 9 assistance grants per year, and we could really, bring that
So
up.
this may help us meet our targets.
We'd like to meet our target of 20 families, so.
And going back to the tiny home piece, this doesn't deal with it, but it does not preclude us having further discussions about that piece as a additional complement to what we're deciding tonight. I mean, so that could be a
It could
future
be an
discussion.
additional
Separate
thing. We just
conversation.
did not, right?
Okay, so we got one piece. Council Trumbull?
Just a couple questions on the multi-units, those all need to still be owner occupied.
Yes.
4 units. And then something was just said about these have to be on owned land with mobile homes.
So in the order that I submitted to council included these specific recommendations. However, these are not statutorily mandated for CDBG, but they are suggested in other comparable programs that help communities perhaps feel as though we are investing in real property that will stay in Bangor. So having the language permanent housing stock, we see that a lot. So that could mean that there's that you remove the wheels from the trailer, for example.
Yeah,
These are not mandated, and you could decide that we want to walk back on those.
no, I agree. I think, as you said, I think they use the same term for manufactured housing and mobile homes, although there's a big difference. I mean, manufactured housing, you can't tell from a house.
That's
Right.
mo- that's modular.
Modular.
Yeah. but
Manufactured is a
The,
trailer.
the mobile homes, I mean, I think people mostly put these in parks, so I think
Mhm.
that make that land requirement, I don't think is gonna make sense. I think these are it's all a lot of people can afford, so
This is
I
true.
I would not favor the land ownership requirement for the mobile home.
This is a good point, and I discussed this after a comment with Debbie that specifically mobile home financing through Maine Housing, they allow these to be located on parks as long as the park lease is extended through their mortgage term.
Mhm.
So that's one way that they've been able to both protect their security investment. We're obviously not making, a loan for the entire home, but we could walk back on the owned land and replace it with something, but really just what kind of direction you might like to have, or impose some restrictions later.
So that's an open question that's different from what's been proposed. Council Leonard, then Council Davitt.
I had a very quick question, actually. It's actually about a term definition because and I think we've talked about this before in the past, but just for clarification, what is our term definition for mobile home? And the reason why I asked that is because I'm predicting we're probably going to have more esoteric 3D printable technologies. And I think that type of home is going to fall into place with mobile homes. So I guess my question is, what is our definition of mobile homes? And can we either include in that definition 3D printed homes to be included with mobile homes, or do we need to create a separate definition for 3D printed homes? And do we need to add that in as an additional comment for anything remotely connected to that type of home?
That's a really great question, because I think what I'm hearing you say is perhaps the definition of manufactured housing writ large versus the mobile home, the traditional trailer versus a modular home, which is also a manufactured home for that purpose versus a 3D printed home. For adding this as CDBG, we're responding to the categorical manufactured housing as mobile homes. And I did not address those other types of housing because I was trying to take that incremental step to ensure that we were able to make that one decision. However, I could add in our programmatic definitions, and where I had also planned to do a lot of definitions and that kind of thing, is we can clearly delineate that for that purpose. We're talking about mobile homes and not manufactured homes. As modular homes are considered stick-built homes for both code compliance and all of these loan programs and the mortgage products. The 3D printed, you're right, it's an up and coming thing and it's really dynamic. So I don't have an answer. I wasn't really addressing that here, but yeah.
So Deb,
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, Councilor Trumbull, thank you for bringing that up on the land ownership piece. I think that's really important in this. So that, yeah, there's a way, as you said, Robin, to kind of address that in terms of the loan length tied to leasing and things. I think
I'll go back in and see if I can't find a better
So
mix
a little
of the
more
solution.
flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in my day job, actually, the 1976 thing, we get calls a lot about people who have said 1978 and 1979 trailers that are in total disrepair, but are not eligible for anything because of that time cutoff. And I know there has to be one, that's not our, that's a federal decision. but
Right.
It is one of those when Councilor Schaefer asked the timing piece. It's just, I know they draw a line somewhere, but it can.
It's a
just
tough
kinda
line.
sucks sometimes,
It
yeah.
is.
But yeah, I appreciate the work on this and so I don't know if did we need an actual motion?
I
know
don't
need
think
one,
we
But
had-
I realized it was just kind of guidance. that
I
you
don't
were
think we
looking
had a
for.
motion on this, but what I'm sensing is that you have guidance to go back and make modifications to bring back to this committee again.
Right, so I did have an order included with this to be able to add the mobile homes, but it did include those restrictions.
Mhm.
I will go back and I'll, see if I can't revise that using your guidance.
Do you want to see it back here again, or can it go forward to council? Full council.
Yeah, I'd say go to full council.
So
Okay,
what we need then, I think, is a motion to move this language forward to full council with the modification that of not limiting it. to
Not
own
on
land.
land, okay.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Somebody want to make that motion?
I move staff recommendation with the modification of not owned land for mobile homes.
Second.
Any more comments, questions about that? Adequate guidance for you?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank you. With that has passage.
all right, perfect.
thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
So can I there was another order there, so is it all right if I address that other bucket of request? So the second thing that we made a change to was we wanted again to conform to the language that HUD uses for our subsidies. And they have actually expanded the areas that we can actually apply those subsidies. And so what we're actually doing is we are addressing the accessibility of a homeowner to access homeownership, but then the added subsidy applications are really looking at how to address the affordability. And so what HUD is allowing us to do is to take, instead of applying that subsidy toward a down payment, you can actually do an indirect subsidy, and you can like buy down their interest rate, or you can do a couple of other things. For example, you can apply that directly to reduce the principal, or you can pay their upfront mortgage insurance. And so those types of things are sort of what they call the back end numbers. And these help the mortgage officer take their payment plug it back into all of their debts and see if they can create a ratio that allows them to be able to make the loan. Sometimes that can be more impactful, not always, but it can allow us to make a decision based on the recommendation of the loan officers to affect the loan, rather than just limiting it to the down payment and closing a cost directly to the homeowner. We could do an indirect subsidy on the other side. So, so this order expands our down payment and closing cost assistance subsidies to be instead applied to the other two options, which are the rate buy down and the upfront mortgage insurance.
I would move staff recommendation on that.
Second.
A motion, second, comments, questions? Seeing none? Good to go.
Awesome.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Look for our website to have lots more color and. Thank
So
you.
just to add a comment, because we brought up 3D housing, I'm just gonna kind of relate it to what was proposed for a housing plan. And there is an element in that proposed housing plan to actively work with the University of Maine and Penquist on the development of the 3D housing package for Bangor and making that a national model. So these issues about how we're going to zone them and categorize them will be part of that discussion, I believe.
And that segues into today, I actually had a meeting with UMO on that very subject. So we'll be working with them to try to partner to bring more of that into Bangor. So kind of a positive meeting. So that's good.
I think part of the outstanding issue there was where that ultimate joint venture between Penquist and the University of Maine goes. And I think in a couple of previous meetings, we've reflected strong interest in trying to make sure it's located in Bangor.
Right.
rather than
I made that very clear today, yeah.
Good.
And the community college actually wants to be part of that partnership as well, which is good.
All the better. Yep.
Yeah.
And if I can just say really quick, and just full disclosure, I'm on the board of Penquist, so like very, very biased here. I think this is the strategy the state needs to follow through with to meet that housing goal of adding 84,000 homes throughout the entire state. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, but I will stop talking because I probably need to run out the door immediately after those comments.
That's okay. We won't talk about it. And
Yeah, so the fall is when a lot of conferences and conventions happen. So I did go to a managers conference in Austin just to get some more training as a department head. So, and that went well. And the Housing Matters Conference that AARP Maine had put together. I was on the panel for that, the opening panel, as well as a discussion on our tiny home park. And actually, Robin was at the conference to review some block grant and programs that support housing as well. So that was good. And then we're going to be at the Grow Smart Maine conference, showcasing all of the projects that are going on in the department. We've been asked to present on what's going on in Bangor at the Grow Smart Maine in Waterville. And we'll be at the polls again. That seems to be an outreach I find that's very effective, is sort of being at the polls when after people vote, they can come over and talk to us. We'll talk about the different projects we have going. We'll have some information to hand out. It's a good way to, have those informal conversations with residents that we don't normally get to do. So we'll be there for that. In terms of overall staffing, I still have some openings. The economic development officer position, the business development position is still unfilled. So we're going to go back out to some of the places to advertise the position See if we can get those filled.
And on that point, I know, I think we've seen how difficult it is to recruit staff. And we've had some gaps. I don't know, but where it would be helpful, but if it would be, I think there's room for an option for you to come back and say, look, we don't have permanent staff to get this done. I need somebody on a temporary basis, or I need supplemental consulting services or something else to get us through this hump
Yeah,
until we can fill this position. Because there may be people out there who have economic development skills where you might be able to say, man, if I just had them 20 hours a week for 6 months,
right.
I could assign them to a couple of projects and move this ahead, even while looking for full-time staff. And I would encourage you not to be shy about asking for that.
Yeah,
If
Deb and I
that
have been
would
meeting
accelerate,
about-
if
yeah.
that would accelerate our ability to implement.
Great. Yeah.
Okay?
And I also wanted to make sure you saw the state housing needs study, so I put that in your packet. So I made for a very large packet, but I did want to make sure that you had that in your.
We've all read it and have a lot of questions about it, but we'll defer that.
Okay, yeah, I haven't taken the magnifying glass out to it yet, so.
Anything else? for that? So we've covered a lot tonight. I want to just, before we go into executive session, I want to deal with one other item. We are in need of a meeting to talk about the consultant's recommendation, on the commercial kitchen. And see if we could wrap that up before the year is out here. Ann had proposed that we fit that in on the Tuesday, the
Yeah,
24th.
that's 24.
But we have a council meeting on Monday and we have evaluations of the city manager, solicitor, clerk. Wednesday, Thursday, so that'll be 4 nights that week. We are scheduled to have a BED committee meeting the night of the election. And it's kind of strange this year because of how late in November the election comes. I would suggest that if you would be available, that not on the night of the election, but perhaps on Monday night of that week, we have a meeting and we complete the review of the commercial kitchen. And we could also tidy up any other outstanding items for the end of the year. Would that be possible?
I mean, I guess my question would be to Anne. Does that seem possible?
Yeah, both of those nights are fine, yeah.
So I think we'll stay away from the election night.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think we try to fit this in and finish up on that Monday.
Okay, so
Okay.
November 6th. Okay,
I mean, it's after 8 o'clock, I'll be fine with it.
Claire and I can be our last act.
all right,
Okay,
All right,
so
15.
I move we go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056C, disposition of real property or economic development.
Second.
we have to have a roll call vote. Counselor Trumbull.
Yes.
Counselor Davitt.
Yeah.
Counselor Schaefer.
Yes.
Counselor Yakubara.
Dr. Baga.
Okay, yeah, Fubaga.
No,
She may not be able to.
Okay,
I think we're good.
with that, we're ready to go. Let's